Welcome to Passionate Reply, and welcome to Great Albums. Last time on Great Albums, we looked at an album that meant a lot to me, but today I'd like to talk about something with a little more universal appeal. Namely, Kraftwerk, and what is quite possibly their most accessible LP, 1978's The Man Machine. Growing up, my main genre of choice was 80s synth-pop, and while the deep influence of Kraftwerk is as significant there as it is everywhere else in electronic music, I was one of those people who initially saw them as somewhat intimidating. Today, more so than ever, Kraftwerk are held up as one of those more highbrow or cerebral groups with a philosophy that transcends mere pop or dance music, which makes them seem respectable, a kind of model minority in the world of music outside rock. While I don't buy into the judgmental quality of that sort of praise, which damns so many of Kraftwerk's greatest fans and imitators, I did get the sense, as a child, that these hoity-toity Germans working with primitive equipment way back in the 1970s might not be what I was looking for in a new favorite band. That was before I heard The Man Machine. While it's certainly true that Kraftwerk were a highly experimental band in their own time, they're one of those acts whose ideas have deeply permeated contemporary music, to the point where their actual work is extremely approachable and listenable to today's ears. Of all the fairly early electronic acts who started making this kind of music before it began to become mainstream in the late 70s, Kraftwerk are almost certainly the ones people nowadays listen to for pleasure the most, and that's no accident. While their earlier albums, like Trans-Europe Express, took more overt inspiration from classical music, The Man Machine was their first great foray into the arena of pop, which I think is key to why it resonates with people. For evidence of that, look no further than the biggest mainstream hit of Kraftwerk's career, The Model.
She's a model and she's looking good. I'd like to take her home, that's understood. She plays hard to get, she smiles from time to time. It only takes a camera to change her mind.
I think it's easy to see why The Model became a hit single. Sure, it may not have the most traditional pop song structure, let alone instrumentation, but unlike a lot of what Kraftwerk had done before, it's got a lot of lyrics and a real sense of narrative. Plus, that narrative we get is about a person and not a machine. A good-looking person in whom the narrator is sexually interested. It's the perfect pop material. Of course, I would be remiss to mention that The Model didn't achieve all of its success until the single was re-released in many markets in 1981, and in those few years the idea of synth pop advanced significantly in the charts and popular consciousness. By the time The Model was a hit, Kraftwerk admirers were already taking over. Look no further than Gary Numan's Cars or OMD's Enola Gay, two synth pop classics that, it must be said, are still about vehicles. That aside, though, not everything on The Man Machine sounds like The Model. In fact, it's surrounded by tracks that have much more in common with Kraftwerk's earlier LPs. Literally surrounded in the track listing. I think that adds to this album's appeal as an ideal entry point into their catalog. It has some things that sound familiar, while also preparing you for what else you'll encounter if you choose to probe deeper into the band. The Man Machine has the least homogeneous profile of any Kraftwerk album. While most of their other classic albums are highly cohesive song cycles that almost blend into one long song when you listen to them in full, The Man Machine doesn't really have those repeated melodies and motifs that tie its tracks together. While many people, especially fans of psychedelic and progressive rock, really like those cohesive albums, I think this change is a welcome one. It gives the individual tracks a bit more room to breathe and express distinctive identities, and makes the album feel a bit more pop, even if the material itself isn't always all that poppy. The Man Machine actually only has 6 individual tracks. They range in length from the 3-minute pop stylings of The Model to the urban sprawl of Neon Lights, which luxuriates in a 9-minute runtime.
Neon lights, shimmering neon lights, and at the fall of night, this city's made of light.
average track length is around 6 minutes, I'm almost tempted to think of the Man Machine as 6 tiny Kraftwerk albums, or at least musical ideas that could have been expanded into full LPs in another universe. Neon lights and Space Lab feel dreamy and easygoing, with floating melodies that draw from the cosmic music scene, one of the many emergent styles that began as something uniquely German and spread throughout the world, in this case becoming an important forerunner to ambient electronic music through acts like Tangerine Dream. Meanwhile, the hard, tick-tocking rhythms of Metropolis and the title track point to the newfound focus on rhythm and the so-called motoric beat that made the music of Noise so compelling. Machine can serve not only as an introduction to Kraftwerk, but also as a sort of crash course in this entire period of electronic music, showcasing some of the most distinctive and influential features of the German scene as well as the shape of synth pop to come. It's a complex and busy historical moment with huge ramifications for almost all of subsequent electronic music, and the Man Machine really creates a microcosm of that whole environment. There is also the fact that each side of the record has one track from each of my 3 broad groups, like an expertly designed sushi platter or charcuterie board for us to sample from. And they both follow the same formula: a pop appetizer, a cosmic entree, and motoric for dessert. The Man Machine also has what is almost certainly the most iconic cover of any of Kraftwerk's LPs. This is how lots of us still picture them in our minds, and it's inspired tons of parodies and riffs over the years, and I think all that acclaim is deserved. Emil Schultz's graphic design for the album was heavily inspired by avant-garde Soviet artists of the 10s and 20s, chiefly El Lissitzky. These visual artists used their art to express their hope for a new world, defined by the promise of technology and their literally revolutionary philosophy. So what could be a better match for Kraftwerk's electronic revolution in music? Lissitzky used bright, primary colors, straight lines, and geometric shapes to convey the built environment of modern cities and man-made architecture. And you've got all the same sentiment on display here. The use of strong diagonals really draws the eye and lends this image a lot of continued visual interest. It's also worth noting the extent to which Kraftwerk's aesthetics inspired later electronic acts, almost as powerfully as their sound. When you picture an electronic band and get a mental image of stiff, stone-faced musicians behind synthesizers wearing shirts and ties, you can certainly thank Kraftwerk for that as well. I also love the title of the Man Machine. The relationship between people and technology is one of, if not the, most central themes in Kraftwerk's entire discography, which is full of references to anthropomorphic machines as well as mechanically mediated humans. The particular choice of the phrase man-machine as opposed to words like android has a fun vintage flair to it, which matches the use of early 20th century visual art quite nicely. As might be expected from the album's stylistic diversity, the Man Machine would prove to be something of a transition point in Kraftwerk's career. Their 1981 follow-up, Computer World, would return to the song cycle format, but with increasing emphasis on ideas from the pop sphere, championed by percussionist Karl Bartos. By the time of the last classic lineup Kraftwerk LP, 1986's Electric Cafe, they had not only amped up the pop, but also incorporated influence from the electronic dance music of the time. Ultimately, Bartos would leave the group, chiefly due to discontent with his treatment by founding members Ralf Hütter and Florian Schneider-Esleben, and their persistent lack of musical productivity.
I give you my affection and I give you my time. Try to get a connection on the telephone line. You're so close, but far away. I call you up all night and day.
On a lighter note, if you're already familiar with the Man Machine, then you should have guessed what my favorite track is. There are only 6 tracks, of course, and there's only one I've yet to mention by name. The album's opener, The Robots. Per my typology from earlier, I classified this as a pop-oriented song, and it certainly is an approachable one that's proven to be quite popular. But it's also got just enough more experimental touches to keep things quite interesting. From an ominous, dissonant intro, a slightly more pop form hinting at a verse-chorus structure soon emerges and contrasts. I love the groove of the rhythm and percussion here, as well as the very heavy vocoder, rich in texture and certainly a Kraftwerk staple. While the lyrics can be read as sort of light and silly, I like to think that the robots in question might also be dangerous. The track Metropolis seems to reference the seminal 1927 silent film of the same name, which is famous for its portrayal of an evil, mechanical doppelganger. Likewise, the choice to translate the lyrics of the song's interlude into Russian is likely inspired by another great work of art from this era, the stage play RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. Written by Karl Čapek in 1922, it's the progenitor of the robot revolution trope in science fiction, the source of the word robot for autonomous machines in almost every human language, and one of the first entries in the illustrious career of an author who helped make Czech a true literary language. While the titular robots take time to assure us that they're programmed to do what we humans want, should we really trust them? That's all for today. Thanks for listening.
Your function automatic, and we are dancing mechanic. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. Я твой слуга, я твой работник.